Okay, I think we've people still joining us, which is fantastic. So what I'm really going to do is I'm going to really kick off this kind of presentation today, right? And really to kind of give the reason for why we're holding these kind of webinars is to kind of give you an insight into what we can offer as a technology and technologies for that matter that we have, especially our own developed technologies that will help and enhance your current design workflow. So we have a number of products that we will demonstrate over a series, but one of these products is called Sovelia Visualizer. So our focus today will be very much focused on Sovelia Visualizer and what it's got to offer and how it's going to help your design workflow going forward and into the future. So without further ado, I'll start going through a quick agenda to kind of give you a feel for what we're going to do today. And again, joined by a number of my colleagues, I'm glad to say that we're going to have a nice team of people helping us out today. So the first thing to start off is really about the agenda. So welcome everybody. I'm going to do a slight introduction to the team. Then we're going to talk about a solution overview. Then my colleague Craig will jump in and do a technical presentation. And then what I'll do towards the end is a complete Sovelia product overview and what's on offer to us to help you as our customers and new customers going forward. And then obviously we have an opportunity to do some Q&A. Just a bit of housekeeping. Please, if you have any questions, please use the question dialog box or the chat dialog box within GoToWebinar, which is the tool we're using today. And also we will be running some polls. So we'll be looking for some feedback, not only of the webinar, but some feedback of where you are in your design process and how we may be able to help you going forward. So I never really introduced myself, but here's my opportunity to do that. My name is Ray O'Mahony. I'm the technical manager within ProCad and Symetri. My colleague Craig is going to be doing the technical presentation today. He's a technical specialist in manufacturing and visualization. And I'm really delighted to have Martin Salhard with us from our Sweden office, who will be assisting us with questions and helping us. I may have a few words towards the end. He really is the product owner. He's the person who's responsible for the product and the rollout and how it's and the future roadmap of the particular product as well. So I'm delighted to have Martin joined, and I'm delighted to have my colleague Craig present this as well. So I'm really looking forward to this. Before I kind of go into Sovelia Visualizer itself, as I said, the main focus today is really around Sovelia Visualizer and what it has to offer around your current workflow. And before I do that, I kind of want to paint a picture of where this sits and lies within a existing workflow or a traditional workflow, or even now how workflows are changing going forward and what are market demands, customer expectations, and what's out there at the minute. What are the big disruptors within the industry, and what are customers' expectations? And I can tell you now, the expectation is a lot more. People want to see a lot more. They want to see what they're getting. They want it from a visual perspective. They want to see, they want to be more immersed in the design phase of the project and more participation in the design phase. And this is the reason why I kind of like showing these particular two slides, which resonate with a lot of our customers, and I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of you on the call today. It's really around how we work in our current design flow, like the standard or the norm that we're well used to, or that we've done for years at this stage, is really that we start off with an initial concept in the design world maybe, and what we would then do is we come along, we would design, we ultimately produce, we sell, we operate, and retire. It's a fixed value. We have our product, we design it, we sell it, and that's it. But things are changing. And the reason why I say that is because, as I very much said at the very start, it's really about customers' expectation, your deliverable to the customer, what they expect, how they want to be more involved. And if you think even from a consumer products perspective, really what we're talking about is, again, this is like a traditional product life cycle. It's a fixed product value, as I said, but from a consumer products or a industrial machine design or medical device, there's more and more customization requirements required as we go along. Customers want more. They want more options when they're purchasing a component or a part or a piece of machinery or a consumer product. There is many examples of this trend happening in the world today and across multiple industries, diverse industries, factory layouts to, you know, consumer product design, to medical device, to pharma, to piping, you name it. We've gone through this with so many customers, and we're seeing this more and more and more. But part of this mass customization and part of this new cycle is really all about collaboration. How do we effectively collaborate with our customers is key in a lot of this design process. And what I mean by that is, I mean by, you know, we can send emails, yes, we can send some PDFs, we can send some technical drawings, but and I've been in the channel for 15 to 16 years, and I've seen industry change now at this point. I'm glad to be able to experience that and learn from my customers. But one of the key topics that comes up quite a lot is about collaborating effectively with your customers and ultimately maintaining your IP, your intellectual property as well. You know, and there's areas around that we really need to look at and how we do that more effectively, but also from a stakeholder point of view. If you're selling an idea, if you're trying to commit to something, or you want to get investors involved in something, to give them kind of a good insight on what you're trying to achieve rather than just a PDF or a 3D model. Like a simple 3D model was the thing for a long time. It's not enough now anymore. And the whole point of our presentation here today is really to kind of discover what's there for you. How can we do that? And again, we're going to show bits live, and then I've got some videos I can show towards the end as well to back that up. So again, as I said, collaboration is the big part of our presentation today. Obviously, there's other key areas that we'd like to discuss with you in future webinars, which is like flexible manufacturing, for example, again, 3D printing, additive and subtractive manufacturing techniques, you know, robot welding, subtractive by milling, turning, and so forth like that. And then we can talk all about that, iterations about 5-axis versus 3-axis. There's loads of information in that silo itself and itself. Customer experience, again, going back to the collaboration, sharing your designs effectively, giving them that immersive experience and that flexibility to explore that design. See what it really is like a true life, a real immersive true life experience. And finally then is intelligent services or smart services added to the component to get proper feedback of performance feedback, serviceability, maintainability, so forth out of your product. So again, those are the key areas that we will look at in future. But today, as I said, it's customer experience and it's collaboration that we're going to focus on. So again, this is more of a product development rather than a fixed product value. It's a complete cycle of the product, from mass customization to collaboration to flexible manufacturing to customer experience to smart services. Excuse me. So what we can do is we can really relate the product. We can see the performance from start to the mass customization, concept to the mass customization, to collaboration to customer sign off and approval, to our flexible manufacturing, and finally the final approval to customer experience and so forth like that. Like, we hear terms quite a lot being bounced around. Really, you know, we hear this virtual reality versus AR, VR versus AR, and I suppose I put these slides in to kind of give you a feel. Again, our focus is really around just the collaboration element and the customer experience element and how we can build on that. One of the key areas is very much about virtual reality. And virtual reality, I just want to go and kind of give an explanation what virtual reality really is. It's really a use of our 3D model that we designed up, put it into an environment, and to give that immersive experience within a safe environment for the user to interrogate, to move around, select options, for example, and to really get a feel for the model or feel for the part or feel for the design within a safe environment before it's actually gone to manufacture, to build. We see a lot more requests for this, and we've been involved in certain projects with this as well with our customers in kind of getting them up and running with this kind of using this VR in their workflow. But we also see, you know, the adoption of VR increasing, but we also see the obstacles that customers may run through. So we're here to help. And the reason why we're here is we see these bottlenecks and we try to address these bottlenecks and try to make this easier. Big thing before we talked about virtual reality is that it was the big word back 4 or 5 years ago, but it would have taken a bit of work to get there, to get you from your 3D model to your virtual reality environment. Now that's changed. It's become more accessible, easier to work with, and we've made this very, very simple and very easy for the end user, that even as the designer, to share something very quickly and effectively into a VR environment. Again, moving on from that, we have what we call augmented reality, AR. And if we think of it in this way, you take your virtual environment that we've brought you into, and now what you've got is you've got a series of menus that pop up as you're navigating through the actual model to give you different options, give you different flavor, movements, colors, materials, different environments, options to move and rotate a component within the virtual environment as well. So you can imagine, and a good example of this quite a lot, and I hope I'll show you towards the end, is a practical example of this is there's in a manufacturing facility that we work with a customer. They do an awful lot of inspection of the end product. And what they do is they go down the floor with a particular iPad and they basically just superimpose the iPad on top of this assembly that's been built and welded, and they're able to automatically define what part number it is and find all through the augmented reality camera, all through the augmented reality environment, I should say. Apologies. So again, this is just one of the simple examples where they can interrogate the information, they can measure to and from, and they can see if it is to standard as well. They can even superimpose the 2D manufacturing drawing on top of that as well to get a kind of a feel for scale and for checking measurements and tolerance. So this is where things are moving and evolving too. For those of you that are using Autodesk Inventor, the question is, how do we get from a 3D model environment that we parametric design model that we use on a day-to-day basis, how do we get it from that environment to an environment such as VR and AR? And it's one of the key questions. It's one of the big questions, and we're going to show you how to do that today. And we're going to show you which is the best approach. But for us design engineers, what's key in all this, and we don't like coming out of our native applications. We like to stay in our Autodesk Inventor environment. We like to model. We might need to make the changes. But oftentimes you'll find that there is a repetitive task where you have to re-import into another software to get the VR, get the AR environment updated. I'm here today to kind of tell you that we've got one solution that's able to take care of all those updates and be able to speed that process quite through, which we're going to quickly right through from your current 3D parametric model design into a VR environment today. So how we're going to do that? We're going to use a product called Sovelia Visualizer. I've said it so many times already in this presentation, and this is just one component of the product range that we have. And this is just a very simplest form or tool that any end user can use today. What it really is, it's basically an add-in that's sitting on Inventor, number one, for the design engineer, but also it's got its own user interface that's built on technologies used with Unity. So Unity is a real big, dedicated software house that really works on with the VR and the AR elements of what we're trying to do in those environments. So we did a very clever thing and we partnered up with these guys who know what they're really doing, and we built a lovely user interface that works both from a designer and from an end user point of view, along with the Sovelia Visualizer viewer as well. Because remember, as a designer, not only needs to share it internally, you also need to share it to the customer as well, that they can use it on their premises without having any additional costs or additional licenses. So again, we can discuss that more. And again, as I mentioned, Martin, our colleague, is on the call. So if you have any questions, please put them into the question dialogues. We'll be monitoring that through the presentation. So again, you can see we're going to go through a technical presentation now with Craig. He's our visualization expert.
Okay, so basically I'm going to just take you through a bit of a technical demo of what Sovelia Visualizer is and what it actually does. It is a very straightforward plugin, so there's not going to be a huge amount of detail. Before we get stuck into the actual program, I wanted to just talk a little bit about comparing the old workflow before Sovelia Visualizer compared to the new workflow. So Ray had mentioned this before, but basically, if we wanted to take an Inventor model and bring it into a 3D VR or AR environment, it usually required a huge amount of work on either someone within the company or would be outsourced. So for example, with Inventor, if we wanted to do a still image render or an animation, we would either use Inventor Studio, which is very limited in what it can do, or we'd have to export them to 3ds Max and set up all of our scene, our cameras, materials, render settings. It was a very complicated process just to get a still image, so it wasn't interactive in any way, and usually took a long time, as well as requiring knowledge and expertise in a whole other program. If we wanted to go down the interactive route, this gets very complicated very fast, because in order to do something, excuse me, oh, clear my throat. In order to bring something into an interactive environment, say we'd have to use Unity. Unity doesn't just have something built in for this. You would have to go ahead and you'd have to develop this whole system yourself, effectively creating your own program. And then you'd have to share the standalone app with people who wanted to view it. And generally, it was a very complicated, very lengthy process, and not really worth it for a lot of companies. So basically, the only real benefits to this system, and this is coming from like an artistic side of things, is you have a huge degree of control and a high level of artistic direction. But other than that, it's very, very niche, very difficult, and generally very time consuming. The limitations: no live updates, it's a manual process. Any changes to the model require pretty much starting from scratch again, and requires complex knowledge of 2 other programs, as well as licenses for those programs if you don't already have them. So with the new workflow, go on to the next slide. Basically, the new workflow with Sovelia Visualizer, we have Inventor, we have an add-in in it, so we have a new toolbar, and we brings your model straight to Sovelia Visualizer, and then you open the viewer, select what you want to view, and there you go. There's no intermediate steps the user has to do. It's extremely simple and easy to use. You've got live updates, you've got live sync. We'll show a little bit of that. It's easy to share with others. You basically just share a link, and if they have the viewer, they can view the model. Doesn't require learning a complex program, as you'll see from this demo. It's a very simple program. And you can do cool stuff in it, like checking object properties, measuring objects, and turning on and off certain parts. The only real limitations I can think of, and this is being very nitpicky from an artistic standpoint, is it will give you less control over the final look of the object in the environment. But considering it saves 95% of the time, it's worth giving up that little bit of control for the simplicity that this program introduces. So with that out of the way, we'll just jump into the tech demo. So ready to make me presenter, and I'll share my screen.
That's great. Just made you presenter there.
Okay, so here I am in Inventor, and I have a kind of relatively simple model here of a printer. And what you'll notice is that we have this new toolbar. So when we install Sovelia Visualizer, we'll have this new toolbar running across the top here. And you notice that there's just a handful of options. We have export, which brings it into the visualizer. Sync allows us to do our live sync in the visualizer. And then we have a settings option. The settings option is fairly simple. All it really is asking is what your axis is and what properties you want to map. So we have this model. Now we want to bring it into our viewer. What we're going to do is we're just going to click on export, which is going to open up this Unity Reflect here and allow us to choose a project to load that into. So I might just create a new project here. And I'll just call it webinar demo. That'll create the project, and that'll allow me to export the data from this into the project. Now, exporting the models can take anywhere from a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on how large and complicated the model is. In this case, the printer is a fairly small model. You can see it only has about 170 components in it, so it doesn't take that long. Now, if we want to actually view our project, we need to open up the Sovelia Visualizer. From here, we'll be able to see all of our projects that we've exported. So we can see this webinar demo has appeared here. So I'll just make this full screen for everyone. So all I have to do is click into webinar demo and give it a second to load in the different assets. I'll just go back to my home here. There we go. And here we can see we have our printer. And now I can navigate this viewport in real time. I can actually look around the model. So the controls are fairly simple. Left click allows us to pan around. Right click gives us a bit more of a first person view, and we can use the WASD keys on the keyboard to move the camera around as if we were walking it around. So what can we do from here? Well, other than just actually getting a nice view of the model, getting to take a good look at it and view it from different angles, We can also check things like its object properties. So if I were to click on this properties palette here, I can select any of the objects in here, and it should display. This is going to let me select it. All right, for some reason that's not letting me select it, but if I selected it, it would highlight the component and then show me the component's properties that we had mapped in the settings menu. Other options we have are measurement options. So if we wanted to measure from two components on the side of the thing, so now, yeah, there we go, now it's working. So I could select different points on the model. So I'll just rotate this around. Oops. And if I select another point over here, you can see it's actually going to give me the distance between those 2 points, which is pretty cool. So really, the kind of idea behind this is it very quickly allows someone to take their Inventor model and view it in 3D so they can move it around and measure certain parts. It's less so for the person who's using Inventor, because obviously they can do that in Inventor, but the fact that we can then share this view with other people, so we can send it on for review to a customer who can then get a look at the model. They can move it around without having to have Inventor installed, and for collaborating within the office. The other options we have available, we can actually turn on and off certain objects. So if you wanted to hide certain components to get a better look at the internals, we can. And we also have this option here to kind of get a skeleton X-ray view of the object. As you can see, incredibly simple in what it does. I'll open up another example here. So I have 2 more examples. I have a jet engine, which is a much more complex object. I think there's over 2,000 parts in this. So I did the export of this ahead of time because this took a few minutes. But we can see that it still has absolutely no problem loading in this model, even with that approximately 2,000 parts that go into this. And again, all the same controls. If we wanted to hide certain parts, we can. So if I wanted to hide that cowl on the front to see the fans, that's a possibility. One other example I just want to show here is a front loader design. So this front loader, what I did with this is there's one thing I haven't talked about, and that is inside the Inventor, Sovelia is smart enough to export some basic materials from Inventor. But if you wanted to add a bit more customization to it, you can actually assign special materials using this Sovelia materials dropdown here. And that's as simple as just selecting the part that you want to apply the material to. You can see I've applied this lacquer yellow to it, saving it and then exporting it. And the reason we have these extra materials is these Sovelia materials are generally more realistic and they tend to give a nicer response. It also gives you that bit more control. So before I had applied these materials, this object actually loaded in as gray rather than being yellow. So I just took a minute, applied some of the Sovelia materials, and then exported it again. It's the same kind of process as applying appearances in Inventor already. So those of you who are familiar with it will have no problem. Like I said, really the biggest thing about this program is simplicity. It's the main goal. You just want as few clicks as possible to get as a result that we can then share with others or send on to a customer. One thing that I do want to show, because I've managed to get it set up. So I'm actually going to demonstrate the use in VR. So I have here, for those of you who haven't seen before, this is a VR headset. So this is an older model. It's an Oculus Rift S. And I'm just going to swap Sovelia into VR mode. And it's a really simple process. All I have to do is come down here to the bottom left, where we have this feather icon, and select the VR goggles from here. This is going to swap it into VR mode. And when I put on my headset, I'll be able to look around and you should be able to see my screen. So give me 2 seconds. So now, hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, let me just check the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Now
That's great.
I can actually move around the model and look around it. Now currently I'm sitting in my chair, so I don't have a lot of room to move around. But if I was standing up and walking around, I could actually kind of walk around this model And inside the VR, we have the same controls that we'd have